Most people in e-com will know what a chargeback is, even if it is a bad actor on the buyer's side. It's not even worth gathering the evidence and disputing it. And the burden of proof is on you as the brand to prove that you actually did deliver the service.
You were once scammed by buying football tickets. How did that lead into launching a fintech company? Hello, welcome to another episode of the Ecommerce Coffee Break podcast. If you sell online, you know the pain of chargebacks. It's not just lost money, it's back and forth, the stress, the risk of your reputation. In today's episode, we're diving into how smart founders are solving these problems at the root by building real trust into every transaction and turning post-checkout chaos into an advantage. For this, joining me today is Conor Lyden. He's the founder and CEO of Trustap, a fintech platform helping marketplaces and e-commerce stores fight fraud with secure payments. What started out from a personal scam experience has grown into a global solution used by more than 250 platforms and going into e-commerce now. So we have a lot to cover. Let's dive in and welcome Conor. Hi Conor, how are you today?
Very good, thanks.
Conor, you were once scammed by buying football tickets. How did that lead into launching a fintech company?
Yeah, it was a couple of years ago now, but my original experience was, I was traveling over and back to Liverpool to watch football matches from Ireland where I am here. And, back then all the tickets were physical tickets. So it was a case of finding somebody on the internet, usually on a marketplace or on social media, sending them money and then hoping that they were legitimate and they would send the ticket afterwards. Obviously, there was issues with that system. So I thought that there must be a better way of doing that. And that was the kind of first version of Trustap. Was a direct-to-consumer product that was, an app that people could use for all sorts of different types of transactions. And then we realized that, or I did at that point, that, when people were using it for different things, that there was maybe an opportunity to use that in other areas as well. And even though it was quite difficult to market it as a standalone product because people didn't do those kinds of transactions every day, they were kind of, maybe once a year, twice a year, you might buy something from a complete stranger on the internet. So it made more sense to partner with the marketplaces where those people were finding each other or where those transactions were coming from. It just so happened around that time, especially around COVID, lots of those marketplaces were trying to, what they would say, go transactional. So let people buy and sell with each other online instead of having to meet up in person and hand over cash. And we had a way to help them do that out of the box. And then, fast forward another couple of years, we started getting more inbound from e-com businesses and D2C brands. And so we started building and extra features and tailoring the product for them as well. So when we, as I sit here today, our customers are made up of lots of marketplaces and lots of e-com stores as well.
I think that's one of the pain points for every D2C business, every e-com store out there is chargebacks, is having not enough trust built up with their customers, or they can't recognize the payment and then a chargeback comes in. Tell me, why are chargebacks such a big headache?
Yeah, I think it's, first of all, there's a couple of elements to it. So there's a financial impact, there's a reputational impact, and there's just the overhead or the hassle of dealing with it all. So, most people in e-com will know what a chargeback is, but it's when, and there are different types of them, but it would be when, a buyer pays for something from your store and then, maybe goes directly to their bank or to Amex or whoever it might be and say, I never got it, or, doesn't go through a normal resolution process for you, but just goes directly to their bank or payment processor and, dispute the charge and they'll notify you then the chargeback is being filed. And so it's more common, or it's more of an issue in the US than it would be in Europe. And our mechanism for dealing with that is by what we call becoming the merchant of record. So we insert ourselves in these transactions almost like an installation layer for brands. So we then take on the responsibility and the liability of dealing with chargebacks, disputes, but also other things around the transaction like tax reporting, all things that the brand would normally have to do themselves, but don't have to do if we're helping them process those transactions.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to that. I was running an online store for 8 years, and whenever a chargeback came in as a merchant, you feel a bit of treated very unfair because you did not have really a chance to reply to the customer because it's already, as you said, with the bank, with the credit card, and then you have to deal with this. Now talk me to what you have or what you are providing, a different solution to that. Talk me through it. How does it work?
Yeah. So there's a couple of elements to it. I think the status quo, as you said, is a brand gets a chargeback, and a lot of the time it's not even worth gathering the evidence and disputing it because it takes a long time. The burden of proof is on you as the brand to prove that you actually did deliver the service, even if, it is a bad actor on the buyer's side that has put the chargeback in. It takes a lot of time, and if the average order value isn't that high, often it's actually just more efficient to just accept the fate and refund the money and move on, and we didn't think that that's fair or good, I suppose. And so how we manage our transactions is slightly different to other solutions out there, but we have what we would call like an end-to-end transaction app, really. So, we have plugins built for Shopify and Ecommerce, or, any custom store can integrate directly as well. But the way that it works is that we run the payments through our system, and in that process, as I mentioned, we become the merchant of record. So we provide this like installation layer so that the brands themselves, first of all, don't have to deal with the chargebacks, don't suffer the financial losses of receiving them, but also don't suffer the reputational issues that getting lots of chargebacks can give you as well on the card networks and things like that, where oftentimes it might affect you long term if you start getting a lot of chargebacks. So we run all of that through our system. We manage and dispute those chargebacks on your behalf. We gather the evidence and submit it. A lot of what we've built is an efficient way of doing that. And we, first of all, get less than the industry average, and we win way more than the industry average. So ultimately, to the bottom line of every brand we work with, there's a large saving there. And as I mentioned, the chargebacks is only a part of that. We also, I suppose, provide uplift in different stages along the transaction too.
Mm-hmm. Talk me through this. Obviously, reputation, you mentioned that is a problem. If you have too many chargebacks, you might be in trouble with your payment processor. It might be Stripe or whatever. They will just either kick you out or increase the fees, transaction fees. So it's very bad for your business overall. And if you have bad actors, so it means customers who are trying to take advantage of having a chargeback and trying to get a product for free. So lots of reasons to find a better solution like yours. Talk me through the step-to-step process of a implementation and how it looks for the customer.
Yeah, so like our plugin is very similar to any other payment plugin that a brand might use. So if you're on Shopify or you're on WooCommerce, if you're able to install it directly from the App Store, if you have a custom site or you're built on some other type of framework, you can just integrate using the API. But the way it looks from a user's perspective is the exact same as any other payment method would look like. So we also built into our process is the option for shipping protection or buyer protection. So when people are purchasing, we can increase conversion by offering that as part of what we offer. Because the reality is the status quo on lots of high performing brands is they have lots of plugins along the transaction that they use to make a transaction finish successfully. So they'll have, maybe shipping protection tools, they'll have fraud prevention tools, they'll have their payment methods, they might have chargeback management tools, they'll have tax reporting tools, and they have to manage all of these, they have to pay for all of these. Whereas what we do is just through one simple plugin, we do all of that. And as I said, key to it is being the merchant of record. So we're able to provide that installation so that the brand is no longer responsible or liable for dealing with chargebacks and disputes and tax reporting. They're the two kind of main areas of liability. And the benefits to the brand are the increase in conversion or just the uplift by us doing all of those separate steps in the best possible way. And then the savings, I suppose, on the other side of not getting as many disputes and chargebacks as well. So we like to kind of present a business case to the brands we work with, and we show them, the delta or the amount of money, additional profit basically that they can earn by using our system for managing their transactions. So going back to your question, if you're a user, and you're or a buyer on one of these brands, and you go to check out, you don't really see anything different than you would see normally. You just check out, you pay your credit card, maybe you pay with Apple Pay or Klarna. But in the background, what happens is that payment runs through a system. If there are no issues, it just, the happy path is those funds get released as they normally would. But if maybe there's a dispute lodged or there are any issues there, then we would handle it for the brand so that they don't have to handle it a lot.
I think that sounds like a very good solution. It takes so much up from your plate. And I think that you said there are usually brands, and I can relate to that as well. There's a lot of plugins going on, a lot of different apps that you have to manage. That's all taken away from you. Now, if a dispute comes in, if a chargeback request comes in, and you kick in, you start working on that. I am as a merchant. How much am I involved? What's my part in this?
In an ideal circumstance, you wouldn't be involved at all. We'd be able to get all the information necessary, but often that does depend on what way it's set up or the type of service you're offering. So if it's something like, physical products that are being shipped, often we can get all the information we need automatically, and we don't have to, be in consultation with the brand. But sometimes when it's services or digital services or more complex products where maybe they're custom built or there's certain elements, then we sometimes need to liaise with the brand to make sure we're gathering all the correct information. But I would say for the vast majority of cases, it's information that we can gather ourselves and file and dispute on the brand's behalf so that they don't have to be hands-on at all.
Mm-hmm. That's a huge time saver. I have dealt with chargebacks, and they take really 20 minutes, half an hour if you have everything together, and it just takes so much time away from your day.
Yeah, there was a couple of reports released recently, one by Shopify themselves, that showed that, on average, it's actually closer to 4 or 5 hours that brands take per chargeback by the time that they gather all the information together. So it's not just the cost of losing the chargeback, it's the opportunity cost of having to spend hours on that. And I think going back to your earlier point, nowadays, it's I think it is possible to build massive businesses, hopefully $1 billion businesses in some cases, with just a handful of people. It's not only one person. And so what you don't want as a brand is lots of different plugins, lots of different services that you have to use and manage, and you need to employ lots of people that have a high fixed cost base to manage and deal with all of these. That's kind of part of our hypothesis, is that we're able to combine all of that into one simple system that essentially lets you focus on the important stuff like marketing and growing the business, and not having to deal with annoying, time-consuming stuff like managing chargebacks and disputes, like optimizing your checkout or even tax reporting. They're just annoying things that brands don't really want to do.
I couldn't agree more. Can you tell me some kind of case study or examples of companies, of brands you have worked with, and what kind of results they saw?
Yeah, so in probably the best case that we've this year, we have a brand that we were able to increase in total, basically uplift profit by 18%. So that was a combination of increasing some conversion on the checkout side, and then saving money by handling and managing the chargebacks better on the other side. So normally it's a business case. There's lots of elements to it. There are fraud tools that some brands use that charge per screened transaction. So if you have a high volume of transactions, you'd be paying quite a lot to these fraud tools, but those fraud tools aren't necessarily incentivized to let every single payment through. They're really just trying to stop any payment that looks fraudulent in some cases. And so we would like to say that our, I guess, we're aligned with the brand a bit better there, because we only make our money when the brand makes money. And so we'll optimize it to try and get as much through as possible and reduce those false positives, which has an impact on conversion, but also has an impact on ultimately the bottom line and on profit too. So I think the value that we provide depends a little bit on the type of business. So in some cases, if it's a high volume brand with lots of transactions and maybe a lower AOV that might struggle with chargebacks, then a lot of the value we provide is more on the back end of the transaction on managing chargebacks and that side of things. Whereas if it's a high average order value or priced items that are being sold, maybe lower volume, conversion is what they care more about, and optimizing the start of the transaction is maybe more of an important aspect. So it depends a little bit what the brand is doing, but We'd like to think that for the most part, when we run the business case and we crunch the numbers, basically that there's a really compelling difference in, the way they're currently set up versus swapping to the Trustap transaction process, basically.
Mm-hmm. On that, who's your perfect customer? You give some examples.
Yeah, I think any modern e-com brand that's built on Shopify, WooCommerce, or even is at the scale where they've kind of custom built the themselves and isn't fully satisfied with how efficient they're running the checkout process. And by the checkout process, I mean everything from the very beginning of the journey and conversion from the cart all the way through to payment authorization and acceptance and fraud management and chargeback management and the reporting of that afterwards. If they feel like they're not doing things in an absolute world-class way or to the best of their ability, then I think we'll be able to add value there. So most of the time our sweet spot would be brands that are doing anywhere between say like 100K and 10 million, which is obviously quite a wide range. But if they're very, very small, we might not be able to show the impact as easily as if they have a little bit more volume. And if they're absolutely enormous, like doing hundreds of millions a year, then they likely have a lot of resources and systems in place and are going to be slower to move as well. So we're kind of in that middle range there, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of our listeners will fall into this bracket, and I think that's a perfect solution for them. Walk me through the typical onboarding process for a new customer. What steps are involved? How long does it take to get up and running?
So it's very, very quick to get up and running. In fact, a lot of the time, what some brands will do is they will basically just add the plugin to their existing checkout, and they might run it alongside what they're already doing and do some A/B testing at the start. And we encourage that as well because it has to work for both sides. So it's as simple as adding any plugin, basically toggling on a payment method. That's if you're using Shopify or WooCommerce, or basically you can download the plugin. If it's a custom build site, it takes a little bit longer, but you're still only talking, a couple of dev hours, hopefully nothing longer than that.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to internationalization, selling on into different countries, different languages, do you support this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the other advantages of using what we are, which is kind of like, a merchant of record service, but like one with extended benefits, is that, if you're let's say a German brand, you want to start selling in the US, if you don't want to get crippled with like international fees and very expensive payment processing, then you have to incorporate in the US and set up an entity there and a bank account there and run your payments through the US. Whereas by using Trustap, they don't have to do that because we can do that on their behalf. So we can kind of localize for them and offer those payment methods. So that's another benefit that we would offer to any brands that have those kind of international ambitions. And so, a lot of the e-com customers would be US based and kind of primarily sell in the US, but for European businesses, it can be a difficult barrier to navigate to get into the US. So that's definitely an area that we can provide a lot of value.
That's a huge benefit. And again, I can talk from experience here, specifically with US customers, they might not have international credit cards. So they only can pay on their local market in the US. And then if you're coming from the outside, that might give you issues, just as a tip here for our listeners.
Yeah. And to be honest, there's often a misconception, or like what we found is that brands themselves don't always know what the true cost of processing a transaction is, because they'll see the headline payment processing rate from PayPal or from, Shopify Payments or Stripe or whoever it might be. And they'll see that it's, let's say 1.4% or 2.9% in the US or whatever it might be. And I think that's the only fee. But actually, when you add in all the different, line items in a transaction in the checkout, the effective rate that they're paying could be closer to 6-7%, because once you add in the couple of cents you pay for your fraud screening, once you add in, if you have any other tools that you're running alongside the checkout, and then you add in maybe that it was an international card or there was a currency conversion that took place, all of these elements basically are combined together to give an effective rate that is honestly a lot higher than most brands think. So when we run the business case, that's part of what we're showing, is that like you're actually losing this much every transaction, and there is a way to optimize that basically.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very important to highlight there. How does your pricing structure work? How do you charge?
It's the exact same as like a normal payment processor would charge. So we just charge a simple per transaction rate that varies a bit depending on what country you're in, but that's it. We charge just a rate per transaction. So it's all bundled in. It's an effective rate that's charged for all the different things I mentioned, like the international localization piece, but also the buyer protection, the shipping protection, the fraud prevention, chargeback management, merchant records piece, which essentially means we do the tax reporting and all that. So it's all bundled into one effective rate. And as I said, the delta is usually, a couple of % lower than the status quo that the brand is already using. So when you multiply that across the between thousands of transactions a month, it can be a big number that's added to the bottom line at the end of the month.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential of savings for a lot of merchants out there, and obviously also streamlining operations. Before our coffee break comes to an end today, is there anything you want to share with our listeners that we haven't covered yet?
No, I guess I would just encourage any brands that are listening to really dive into, trying to figure out exactly how much they're paying for every transaction, and to add in, the time that they're spending on doing that as well. And if it's something that they're interested in, getting help making that calculation or seeing what other options are there, I'd love if they would reach out, directly to me. I'm sure you can make my email available there after the show, or else just reach out to Trustap directly, and we'll go through that with you, and maybe it's something that's suitable for your brand.
Perfect. I will put the links in the show notes, then you just one click away. Conor, thanks so much for giving us an overview. I think that's a very important topic for every merchant out there. And with very small profit margins of a lot of DTC brands, I think it's even more so important to optimize this part in their business. Thanks so much for your time today.